This is your chance to fill out the holes in your 1911 collection. Firearms friends, we are back to show you more exciting pieces from our REAC on time auction. And I don't know how many times I can tell you how good this sale is and how it's like a wish list if you're into collecting fine historic firearms. It's going to be bigger than ever. We've gone to 4 weeks instead of 2, which means we're closing over 2 days, February 28th and March 1st. We are going to have a live broadcast on February 28th with some of our influencer friends like 1911 Syndicate and 1776 Duck. Myself and Kevin Hogan will also be participating, so make sure you tune in for that. And of course, the introduction of REAC Select. REAC Select is the good stuff. It's our premier level quality items in a REAC on time auction. It's the high condition, the rare, the just plain cool, the historic, all the good stuff you can find in our catalog is now marked clearly with REAC Select. So look for those items when you're checking out the listings. And today we're going to talk about 2 world wars. We're going to make a video today on this pretty instantly recognizable 45 because they don't make a 46. Actually, I want to do this because it's the tip of the iceberg for this REAC on time auction. So many 1911s. World War I, World War II, everything in between, special contract, etc. About the only things that aren't in the sale are North American arm and a Singer. You know, the rarest of kind of both models. So if you want that, if you want rare contracts, you want specific makers, come take a look. This is your chance to fill out the holes in your 1911 collection. Let's start off with one of those unusual contracts, and that's a U.S. Navy contract 1911. This is shipped in 1914, so as we're up armoring essentially in preparation for our eventual involvement in 1917, it's one of 15,000 that have that rare Navy marking on the right side of the slide. Now, if you're really looking for a hole filler in a collection, most of these are shipped to the naval docks in Brooklyn. This one is part of the only shipment, 4,500 guns, that went to Springfield. So you really want something that stands out from all those other regular Navy shipments. We've got a 1911 for you in the sale. Next, going from the Navy, how about to just the good old American Expeditionary Force. This is AEF shipped. This is directly to France. This is shipped in 1918. This is when the U.S. is really, it's found its legs the best it ever has in its history for turning that war machine up, putting it into third gear. We are shipping as many guns as we can to Europe. This is one of those. This isn't shipping to an arsenal stateside or another place. This is shipping directly to, I believe it was Ordnance Depot 6 in France to the AEF, the American Expeditionary Force. So again, a good old Colt, by the way, not one of our other manufacturers, classic Colt. But if you're one who collects those shipments, first shipment, second shipment, U.S. Navy, if you get the Marine Corps shipments in World War II, here's another one for you shipped directly to the American Expeditionary Force. This is where we get into the fun stuff in my mind. When you get into these manufacturers that aren't your typical firearms manufacturers, but they're such a great symbol of that industrial wartime might of the United States, both in World War I and in World War II. And so here we have Remington UMC. They're of course a firearms manufacturer, but not a standard military necessarily, but they do get their contracts. And of course, when they get the contract for the US to make 1911s, they have many contracts. Rem UMC is extremely busy. They're producing arms for France, they're producing arms for Russia, but when they get that contract for 1911s from Uncle Sam, everything stops. Kudos to you, Remington UMC. It takes them 8 months before they're producing pistols, which sounds like a really long time. I assure you it is not. To get all that machinery not only made, set up, producing guns, and having finished functioning firearms come out the tail end of it, 8 months is pretty amazing. There's 21,676 of these that Rem UMC produces. So pretty rare, especially when we compare it to the Colts of the time. But in Meadows' book, he talks about 21,676 that are produced or that are serialed, but there's 22 of them that are unaccounted for. They've made 22 more. So there's 21,698 of them. It doesn't really know how to account for those. Are they lunchbox specials? You know, people made the guns in parts and kind of put them in their lunchbox and took them home. Doesn't seem like a very patriotic thing to do during the Great War. But he also talks about maybe some were duplicate serial numbered. Maybe some were just missed and not serial numbered at all. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we have here. This is an unserialized Remington UMC 1911. So not just a Rem UMC 1911 from the Great War. We have one that's not just one of almost 22,000 that were produced. How about one of 22 that are unserialized? I told you, the good stuff is coming this February in REAC on time. What a great chance to pick up not just a Remington UMC, but a very, very special Remington UMC. Last on the table, kind of one of my favorites. I love hearing, not only about unusual manufacturers, but the most unusual manufacturers are the ones that never had a chance to make a 1911 at all. They issued contracts to a lot of people for a lot of guns who did not often have time to tool up or produce a single one before the armistice on November 11th. Here we have one of them, very special. I can count on one hand the number of these that have come through since I've been working here in 13 years. And what we have is an AJ Savage Munitions Colt, as they are known. The AJ Savage is one of those that didn't produce any full 1911s. Now, the prevailing wisdom right now is they were able to produce springs, they were able to complete some slides. Those slides are indicated by this little mark here, back behind the patent dates of an S inside sort of an arsenal-looking bomb. What we would normally think of with Springfield, or looks very similar to a Springfield marking. As I should say too, this is not Savage Arms. That would be Arthur W. Savage. That's his father, Arthur J. Savage. He does AJ Savage Munitions, who has the contract for these. That's who these are all associated with. They are one of a number of companies, like I said, that never produced a full 1911. But then again, neither did Winchester, pretty notable firearms company. AJ Savage Munitions, also Savage Firearms. They were solicited for a contract, didn't produce a thing. National Cash Register Company, also never produced a 1911, but man, how cool would it be to see that on the side of a 1911? Fantastic. Now there is also some research going on behind these. Highly encourage you to check it out with additional documents, coming to light every decade. Andrew Stilinski of Archive Research Group has a really, really good article on these in American Rifleman. It was written not that long ago. So if you want to find out more about the Savage Slides pistols, please read that. Meantime, if you want to add one to your collection, you visit our website and place some bids. Now, the last of the World War I isn't, of course, World War I at all, but it is a 1911. This is a 1911 Transitional Model. Now, of course, there were changes between the 1911 and the 1911A1. Those changes were proposed in 1923. They began producing pistols in 1924. They had a first contract that year for 10,000 guns. 9,000 were going to be just production for the military. 1,000 were going to be national match pistols. They have all the changes. As you can see, we have our extended mainspring housing. We have knurling here on the back grip. We have our cutouts by our trigger guard. It does have the thicker front sight. I know you can't see it from there, but so it has all the changes. But as a lot of you know, the nomenclature doesn't change until mid-30s. It doesn't become the 1911A1. So here, and they don't order any, I should also say. They don't order any until the 30s. So this is that 10,000 gun shipment of these transitional models that still have the old name but have all these new features. In fact, if we look back here, those are from serial number 700,001 to 710,000. And this is one of the first 100 of those transitional models. This is serial number 700,072. So not just a transitional model, one of the very first transitional models, an important part, especially if you're a 1911 collector, to go from one to the other. And I'm pretty sure you see why we had to put this one in the video. Now let's take a look at some of our friends from World War II. I'm gonna cover these in order of production numbers. So I am naturally starting with the Remington Rand with 878,000. 1911A1 pistols produced. Now, Remington Rand is not the same as Remington UMC that was producing them during World War I. Remington Rand is their offshoot that was producing typewriters. Like, they acquired them in 1927. It was Rand Cardex, like Powers Accounting. And they combined these into Remington Rand. And that's how you have making 1911A1 pistols in World War II, a typewriter company. Absolutely love it. And that's not to say that they stopped making typewriters during World War II. On the contrary, they were producing a ton of typewriters. You had overseas journalists, war correspondents, more people typing back and forth to each other than we can possibly think of today. And so not only are they producing typewriters, they're producing the most 1911A1s during World War II. So they're maintaining, a lot of typewriter production and also a lot of 1911A1 production. Now, it started off slow, and I think that's a story you find with a lot of these. To get the tooling right, to get the parts right, a lot of these places are requiring help from Colt, requiring help from Springfield. Somebody needs to go over and make sure that all these tolerances are right, or these measurements are correct. Getting things set up, obviously, it had a slow start, but they picked things up rather nicely. In fact, some of their machinery that Rembrandt got was from Singer and from Harrington and Richardson. So a lot of neat World War II history with the Remington Rand. Next on the list with 629,000 produced, and perhaps a little bit of surprise on the list, is Colt. And it's a surprise because it's their design. It's their gun, right? Like, shouldn't they be the leading producer of 1911A1 pistols? Kind of. As mentioned with the Remington Rand, not only are they going around in both world wars, for that matter, they're going around and helping people get set up for production, which they cite as delays for their production quotas. They're also producing a lot of other things for the US government, in case we forgot. M1919s, Madus heavy barrels, Colt Commando revolvers, just you name it. Colt's doing all sorts of things for the war effort. So they didn't have sort of a sole focus like Remington Rand. So 629,000 produced is a darn good number for Colt. And this is a darn good example of a Colt. I put it on the table because we have this marked as an excellent Colt M1911A1. This park finish, the grips look great, the markings are crisp. Really, really nice example. You could look for a while and not find a Colt that good to put in your collection. Next on the list with about 335 to 340,000, Ithaca. Now, of course, we don't typically think of Ithaca with 1911A1s. We associate them with fine double shotguns. And then later on, the Model 37, which we see in some trench shotgun capacity. In World War II, that's absolutely what they started producing, was their M37 trench gun. Didn't take the government long, though, to say, we would like you to focus more on 1911 production than with trench shotguns. And so they did. They also tooled up very, very quickly. Also, like Rembrandt, they got some of their tooling from Harrington and Richardson. That 340,000, that's from 1943 through the end of the war. So really a high number in really a short period of time. And again, you go from fine doubles to 1911s with parked finish, ready for Europe. Gotta love the American industrial might during World War II. Last but not least on this list, with 55,000, Union Switch and Signal. And I love the little logo that they have right there on the left side. It's not just written out like Remington Rand or Ithaca. They did manage to get their little U and the sort of intertwined S's put on the left side. Union Switch and Signal, as the name would imply, made railroad parts like railroad switches and signals. Very involved in World War II, but also very involved in World War I. You're talking like with airplane engines, fuses, parts for artillery. World War II, they kind of pick up right where they left off. Not only with 1911A1s, with bomb parts, fuses, shells, you name it. Union Switch and Signal is all in for the war effort in World War II. Now, they originally had a contract for 200,000, and you'll hear that a lot with a couple places. Then the Army pulls back. They're like, oh, we don't, or the Ordnance Department, we don't need quite so many, so just make 30,000. They're like, just kidding, we need 25,000 more. And so that's how you get Union Switch and Signal making 55,000 of them. A lower number, but there were some discrepancies on what kind of contract the US military wanted them to have. So with all those other parts, M1 carbine parts, bombs, fuses, you name it, Union Switch and Signal, or just Switch and Signals, 55,000 makes them the rarest 1911A1, except for, of course, the Singer. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, firearms friends, this is the tip of the iceberg for 1911s in our February on-time auctions. 4 weeks long, gives you plenty of time to search these listings, not just for 1911s, M1 carbines, M1 Garands. If you love US military arms, you will be able to find it. For that matter, our usual smattering of Colts, Winchesters, sporting arms, you name it, it's going to be in that sale. Head over to rockislandauction.com right now, check out React Select, and of course set that alarm for February 28th in our live broadcast with 1911 Syndicate and 1776 Duck. Until next time, keep your powder dry.